Welcome everyone to the VYPE podcast. I'm Robert Gonsolin here with Will Turbach and Tinley King. Today we have a special guest, Max Merril, who is committed to the University of Texas. He plays offensive tackle for Strake Jesuit, and we'll be glad to have him here today. But as for now, before we get into that, we are going to run through a couple games in football that have been played this past weekend.
Yeah, so let's start off with Dawson, Pearland Dawson and Pearland.
Big rivalry against those two, for sure.
Yeah, as some of you may know, that Pearland Dawson was actually formed as a school because the regular Pearland became overcrowded. So usually Pearland has dominated that rivalry, but this year Dawson's looked great. They're 4-0 and they won this game 17-6. Robert, you know about both of these teams because Strake Jesuit is in District 23 with them. If you want to talk about this game, that would be great.
Well, Dawson has a very experienced running back, Jaden Stewart, really led the team last season. He had 98 yards last night and a touchdown in a not-so-high-scoring game, but his touchdown definitely put the Eagles ahead.
Yeah, their quarterback this year, Dawson's quarterback, is a sophomore, Colin Johnson. He was 5 for 10 for 55 yards and 3 picks, so, just not a great passing game for Dawson, but they got the job done, and both defenses were great, but it looks like Dawson had the upper hand this week.
So that was a pretty close game, unlike the Grand Oaks game versus Austin, which Grand Oaks won 69-10. You guys want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, senior wide receiver for Grand Oaks definitely stole the show. He had 3 touchdowns in what I like to call a trifecta. He had an 87-yard rushing touchdown, a 7-yard touchdown reception, and a 90-yard kickoff return for a touchdown.
Yeah, that was Seth Wright, but talk about Micah Cooper. He also had a big night. He had a pair of rushing touchdowns. One was for 32 yards and another for 82 yards. And this win marks Grand Oaks coach Dr. Mike Jackson. This is his 200th win as a head coach.
Definitely a lot of glory for Dr. Mike Jackson in the Texas high school football realm. Let's head over to a different area of Texas. We had Longview facing off against Westbrook. Will, Tinley, can y'all talk a little bit about that game?
Yeah, Longview started out the season really weak. They had their first regular season loss in a few years. And the same thing for Westbrook. They just looked a little bit shaky, but Longview just dominated this game, 51-28. It was a rematch of the 2018 6A Division II state championship game. That was a great game. This one, not so much. High scoring, but not very competitive.
Yeah, Longview senior running back Caden Meredith had 4 rushing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. So Longview lost their first game of the season to Temple, but have gone on to win 3 straight. They'll be 0-4 facing West Mesquite next week.
We also had Pflugerville in a very close matchup. They came up short to Leander by a score of 48-47. Since the beginning of the 2018 season, the last time Leander has won, they've been on a 22-game losing streak, so they finally got that win that they desperately needed. And they came back from a 12-point deficit. Yeah,
Pflugerville is not a scrub team. They're a really good team in that division, and really just that area of Texas. So they've got Garrett Landry, who threw for 169 yards for Leander and 2 touchdowns, plus 2 more scores on QB sneaks. This was the second week in a row that Aiden Pirot recovered an onside kick late in the fourth quarter, and their running back rushed for 63 yards and had 2 touchdowns.
So this win for Leander overshadows what may have been considered Pflugerville's sophomore Jake Aloka's breakout game. Just to talk about some stats he's been compared to Walter Payton, who played for the Chicago Bears. He ran for 284 yards, 5 touchdowns, even helped out a junior finishing with 100 yards, and this overall gave the team 425 yards.
Lots and lots of stats on that sheet for this game. Obviously high scoring, as we said, the score is 48-47, and that's just the beauty of how Texas high school football goes. But contrasting to that game, we had a different shutout. Austin Westlake destroyed San Marcos by a score of 56-0 last night. Cade Klubnik had 220 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 4 rushing touchdowns, 6 overall scrimmage touchdowns.
Yeah, he's got offers from just about everywhere, highlighted by Auburn, Michigan State, LSU, and Miami, but he's just a junior. Westlake is one of the premier programs in the state of Texas, so there's going to be a lot of eyes on him, not only this season, but next. There was also rushing touchdowns from Graydon Ackfor and Luke Respass. And we get to talk about who will be our guest very soon. He was the defensive player of the game in the 6A championship last week when Westlake won. That's Michael Taft. He had 2 tackles and a fumble recovery. So we are very excited to have Mike on very soon.
And now we'll be heading into our interview with Max Merril, who, of course, like we said, plays for Strake Jesuit. Strake Jesuit is actually coming off a Thursday night win over A-Leaf Hastings. Their quarterback, Connor O'Hara, threw for 3 touchdown passes and 1 rushing touchdown. But playing behind that solid offensive line that Max Merril leads. And here we are, we're leading into Max Merril's interview. We'll be right back. And we're back now with our first guest on the VYPE podcast, Max Merril from Strake Jesuit, a University of Texas at Austin Longhorn commit. Max, thank you for coming today. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're excited for you to be here. And we've noticed that you recently committed to the University of Texas, like we just said. A lot of your offers didn't really come much in your junior season, but then a lot more started to come in your favor over quarantine. Can you just talk about that whole offer process and how you started to fish in a lot of them?
I mean, for me, I'm a 3-star on 24/7 and everything. So a lot of schools that I've been offered by and that have looked at me really got those 5-star, 4-star offers out there really quickly. I kind of got offered early for the Ivy Leagues pretty much. So I got early offers from Ivy Leagues, some more FCS teams, and then the FBSs kind of rolled in later in the process once I kind of, get those offers under my belt that kind of show everybody what I'm all about. They started looking at my film with that credibility under there, and my film spoke for itself at that point.
And so did you have to make any changes to your own recruiting process in order to get your name out there?
I mean, there's definitely some stuff that I did. You got to get your Twitter in line and everything. I made sure my Twitter said 275. I might have been weighing 260 at the time. Now I'm 280. But it's when you got to try and do your best to get recruited out there because everybody's lying, everybody's doing all these things, and as well as that, and getting really good on Zoom was something that was new that no one really had to do before. But a good useful skills. I can do a really great phone interview now because I've been recruited by 40 colleges over the phone, so it's pretty nice.
So obviously this isn't something that's really new to you.
Yeah, no, it's pretty normal.
Yeah, so you got an offer, I believe it was on a Tuesday, that you posted it from the University of Texas, and by that Friday, you committed. What was that process like with Coach Herman, and just did you know from the start that's where you wanted to go?
So they asked for my transcript, I think it was back in March, and I never really heard from them again. And then the same guy asked for my transcript, reached out to me again, said they were looking at me. And really in the next 4 days, I was on the phone with Herman, Coach Hand, and after that point, I knew it was kind of getting serious, and I was looking at it, and because I'm trying to be a business major anyways, my parents really, really care about my education and everything. So when you look at UT and you look at McCombs, there's a no-brainer there for the education part. And that program, it's ranked top 10. It's one of the most valuable programs in the country. So at that point, plus they really care about internships and your experience in life. So it's pretty neat. And at that point, we were just yeah, this is definitely the place. We got to take this offer now because I've had some doors closed in my face before by other schools, and I wanted to make sure I got this one unlocked.
Yeah, and then some of our viewers may have seen that video a few months ago about another Strake Jesuit alum, Jet Bush, who recently got a scholarship from the University of Texas. He's a sophomore there now. Have you talked to him at all since you committed?
Yeah, I've known Jet basically since I was 2. So I've been really good friends with him for a long time, and I FaceTimed him when they were looking at me. It turns out he was kind of vouching for me up there pretty hard. Checked with an old alum of Strake, Barkley Briggs, on the offensive line, goes playing at Davidson now. He checked with him to make sure I was not a wuss, basically. So it was kind of funny to go through that process, but luckily he put in a good word for me, and now I'm here.
But obviously, you never doubted your potential in any way to play for the University of Texas. You've always known that, as for yourself, you've always believed in your ability to just play at the big level, right?
Yeah, I mean, my size is something that's been really helpful for that, but one thing that's a little weird about being an offensive lineman is that you go through your basically entire football career. I've played offensive line my whole life, and you don't really get a lot of praise for what you do. So, I mean, you don't really know how good you are. You know that you beat the guy in front of you. It feels great, but you don't know that you're really going to play at a really high level until you go out there and you see the other guys that are playing offensive line. And once I saw them, I was like, okay, I really could be doing a good job out here. And especially with me getting bigger too, it's been kind of finding myself as more of a competitive athlete.
Have you talked to any other recruits in your class committed to the UT? Maybe like not even in Houston, but in other areas of Texas.
So I've talked to Hayden Connor briefly. I mean, I've just been keeping tabs on some of those guys, especially the offensive linemen. Not to necessarily scout out the competition, but kind of to just look and see what Hayden Connor's doing, see what he's looking like. I think it's Mike Walensky is another recruit for UT that I'm just following on Twitter and seeing what he's doing. But I mean, the casual congrats, but not nothing too much. I mean, I'll spend a lot of time with those guys the next 5 years, so I'm not too worried about it.
So going back to just Strake in general, I just saw that recently you guys got a big win against A-Leaf Hastings, 45-7. Just tell me how you're feeling about this huge win.
It was pretty good. It was a good rhythm step. We started at 0-2. We played a pretty good team, King and Pearland. Really close games and lost them. So team was a little bit down. We needed that rhythm step. Play a team that wasn't quite as good as us, and 45-7 I think speaks volumes about that. But now we're gonna gear up and play Shadow Creek. So
yeah, Shadow Creek. That's probably the biggest game you'll have this year. You've already played Pearland. You took another loss to King. This is a team that's meant a lot to you in your past few years on varsity and Strake. Can you talk a little bit about this matchup with Shadow Creek?
So, I mean, they're athletic. It's their first time in 6A, though, so they were 5A before this, and they just got moved up. I think we've got something surprising for them. Strake always surprises people, and especially the way we play. I heard that they had coaches at our game for Hastings. I think they're a little bit scared of us, and to be honest, I think some of us are scared of them. But we can really go into this game and show the world we mean some business right now. We've got the players to do it. Between me, Jacob Syke, and some of the other athletes on our team, I think we can really go in and make a difference, but it's going to take basically perfect gameplay from us.
Now, this is your third year on varsity, so you've been of the 2021 class of kids who play football at Jesuit. You have been on varsity the most. It was you and three other players. The district is, in terms of how good teams are, the district has changed a lot since y'all entered District 23, or since it was formed a couple years ago. How does it feel? I know that a couple of new teams are in this district now, like Shadow Creek, Will was talking about, and Alvin, and some teams have left, like George Ranch. Does it, regardless of which teams have been good every year, which teams are new to the district, does it feel different from your sophomore year when Pearland and maybe Hastings they were the other two top teams besides you guys?
It kind of feels like there's a new big dog for us to take down with Shadow Creek, but other than that, I mean, Pearland used to be the one that we were really afraid of. I mean, to be fair, we did lose to them, but I don't think they're as good as Dawson is either. And really, with the team, and I think the way we're shaping up, I think we should, and hopefully will, win out the rest of this year. But as regards to how it changes, it hasn't been too much. I've been happy that we don't have as many, we don't have to drive all the way out to Brazos Wood or anything like that anymore. That Alvin's in, and it's not nearly as far. It's a home game this year, so that's really the only difference for me. All the big dogs have stayed in. We've only added harder teams. Yeah,
Robert was on the call for that game against Pearland a few weeks ago, and I thought y'all played great. It was just a tough game. Both teams really played a nice game, and then this week you got a big win over Hastings. What would you say is the difference between those two games?
I think one, I mean, obviously you're going to have to recognize that the skill level of the players was completely different. Like, we were bigger and stronger and faster than these dudes were this week, but we actually kind of did pull it together. So if you saw the Pearland game, anyone could have told you that the offense was not firing all cylinders. the CE King game, the defense was firing on all cylinders. So, we had a good offensive game the first game, great defensive game the second game. I mean, they were held to, I think it was 10 points for, 3 quarters. So, I mean, the defense did a really good job, and we kind of just messed up there. But in this Hastings game, we kind of picked up the slack on both ends and kind of played all 3 sides of the football with special teams, and we really took care of business.
And that offensive line, 4 seniors on the offensive line this year for Jesuit, can you just kind of talk about that chemistry that y'all are having?
So it's actually a pretty interesting dynamic. So I played on the offensive line with Luke Melton, who's also a 3-year starter. And Sean Lade was on the line last year. He's our guard. And then we have our other guard, Paul Pavlidis, who's new to the starting position and new to guard. Who's a senior. And then we have a sophomore tackle. So it's kind of, we've got 2 new guys and a new sense of leadership. There's chemistry there between, especially on the left side, me and Paul get along really well. But we're still trying to figure out calls and make sure everything's going the right way. I mean, offensive line is one of the more complicated positions on the field, and I think everybody knows that. But it's getting those calls down and making sure everybody's doing their job. It's tough, but we definitely out physical. I would say every defensive line, we all had that mean streak, and it was, the thing that got me recruited was that mean streak. It's the thing that is really common at Strake, especially in the offensive line.
And obviously, to just stay in shape over the season, it takes a lot of just off-season working out. And the city of Houston, greater Houston area, has definitely proved itself in this class to be a big city for producing top offensive lineman recruits. There's others like Donovan Jackson and Luis Chavarria and Cullen Montgomery and Hayden Connor and Bryce Foster, Katie Taylor, obviously. Have you been keeping tabs?
So, I mean, I've gone to camps with them before, so I basically saw all those guys at it was the Invite Rivals camp in Houston. It was actually at CE King Stadium. So I was over there, and I really saw what those guys were about. I mean, I saw why Donovan Jackson's committed to Ohio State and everything. And especially Bryce Foster. Bryce Foster, I would say, is the meanest dude I've ever seen. And, he's really big and really mean, and it was cool seeing all those guys and cool seeing the competition and everything, knowing that you have to work a little bit harder. I mean, those guys are 4 or 5 stars. I'm a 3-star. I'll show them, we'll see who ends up better in college, but I'll take it for now. I'll take 2nd place.
And, how are you just making sure that, 1 and 2 right now, but y'all coming off a good win just to keep the offense comfortable? How are y'all going to make sure that you're just going to keep this cool, just comfortable rhythm going throughout the depths of district play?
So we got a really loud and leadership-full team. So we got a lot of guys that are really interested in leading the team. And I mean, the way that I've led in the past couple of years has been more by example in the first place. So, you're going to see me on the field. I'm going to be doing my job. I'm going to be driving guys 12, 15 yards off the ball. But if it comes down to it, I can get everybody in line. But we really do feel like we need to win, and I think a lot of people know that. A lot of people say it and kind of say the things that I'm thinking. So I don't really have to say much all the time, but if it comes down to it, I do.
And Max, before you wrap this up, is there just one word or just one thing you have to say about yourself that people probably haven't really picked up on about you as a football player, that people aren't getting the whole main idea of put your name out there, one thing to describe yourself, I'm this type of player?
Yeah, I'd say probably gritty is the best way to put it, especially from our position. Finishing blocks, getting pancakes, being a little mean on the field and trying to do your best to help the team and everything, no matter what. You're not playing for the individual, you're playing for those touchdowns, those 400 rushing yards for that running back, not for yourself.
Well, that's good to hear. There you have it. Max Merril, senior offensive tackle from Strike Jesuit, committed to the University of Texas. Max, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And that wraps up everything we have for this week. We want to thank Max Merril for coming on and, being interviewed with us. And we are excited to have another guest on next week. We'll see you then. For Robert Gonsolin, Tinley Kane, I'm Will Turbo.